Hey, I'm Mike Myers, and this is the Songwriting for Guitar podcast, which is geared to support songwriters and producers to gain confidence and turn pro. I bring on industry experts to help you improve and monetize your skills, engage better in the writing process, and build healthy habits to create a sustainable career that you love. Caffeinated, inspirational, conversational. Hey friends, Mike Myers here with the Songwriting for Guitar podcast, episode number 92, Leverage Your Guitar to Get Great Gigs. Okay, so how do we get better gigs leveraging our guitar skills? This episode, I'm so happy to have former student and now Songwriting for Guitar coach Brian Belonzi with me. And we get into this because Brian has owned the market when it comes to this area. And he gets into the specifics of what to start to do when it comes to the technical skills that you need, but more importantly, how do you start to network and what should you be looking for when you're trying to go after these type of gigs? We get into it all. So here we go. We're going to dive into it. Episode 92, Leveraging Your Guitar to Get Great Gigs. What I want to dive into, because you are so good at live gigging, because, you know, I've coached you, but when you started talking about live gigging, I realized there was very little I understood other than being in a band context. But the idea of being a solo acoustic performer, booking your own gigs weekly, negotiating fees, having contracts, having all that stuff lined up, I know very little. I know nothing. Because going through it, I'm like, how are you doing this? And like, how do you find these? Because we lived in the same city, and I was like, is it different? Like, what's happened? What am I missing?
Yeah, it's crazy that we were in each other's backyards, and we didn't know each other until you moved to Nashville. So there you go. It's definitely an art form. I would say, as far as booking these gigs, I will say that what has changed, though, is the climate for solo artists and duos and even three-piece bands with some percussion, maybe very light drumming. The opportunity for those acts has grown tremendously in the Pittsburgh area, just with wineries and breweries and small venues that it's unfortunate for bands that the venues, to me, seem to be few and far between these days, at least for bands to make money.
It just seems like it's a different facet of live performing. Like, they're both live performing, but there's, I guess, like, there's benefits to having a duo, a solo person, or like a small three-piece, because people can still eat, hold conversations. They're being entertained. Where if you have a band that's like rolling up with like two half stacks and they're setting up, it's like, no, that's not really appealing.
We wouldn't have enough time for me to list the benefits of being a solo artist, a solo performer over being a band performer. I mean, one is not showing up hours and hours prior to the gig to set up your gear and do sound check. And God bless all the drummers out there that have to do that. You are sometimes background music, though. I do a lot of private events and country club gigs and things like that, where you're not going to get that attention from the audience like you might at, say, a bar gig, which I do a lot of those too. But these country club gigs and these private events, these corporate events, they just want someone there for the cocktail hour, happy hour kind of thing. They call it background music, but it's lucrative.
I was going to say, it's like ambience. It's just like, they want that experience. But how did you stumble into this? Was it just like, how did this happen?
I've been performing live since I was 15. And you may or may not, I'm older than you are, so you may or may not know, one of my first live performances was at a place in Oakland called the Electric Banana. And this goes way back. I was not old enough to be there. I still, to this day, my parents, the fact that they let me perform there, and I went unaccompanied with some of the older guys in the band at 15 years old. That was a crazy place, but that was one of my first ones. And I've been performing live ever since. I was in bands through high school and into college. And after college, it was always about being in a band. I never did anything solo. I never wanted to sing. I remember being the only guy in our 4-piece band in high school that could somewhat sing. And so I was like, well, you're it. So, and I never I said, no, listen, I'm a guitar player. I want to play lead guitar. I have my Eddie Van Halen Cherry Red Kramer with my PV amp that weighed more than a house. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And so I never really, I never saw myself as a performer, a singer. From there, I never looked back. But I was in bands all the way up through my early 30s. And then my brother and I, who's a very talented guy, sings, plays guitar. He and I had a duo for many years. And so that's when I started. I think that would have been around the time where I started to see the opportunities to not only be in the band, because he was actually in the band I was in as well, but we started to branch off and do some acoustic stuff. And it's like, I kind of dig this. This is great. Like, because it's laid back, it's mellow. It's more about the vocals and the dynamics of the guitars. So really enjoyed that. We did that for a number of years. And, he's still in bands, and I try to smack him upside the head every now and then and say, dude, what are you doing? But he loves that. And that's all well and good, but we had to part ways to save the brotherhood. I think, it was one of those things where I could tell his passions were still to sing lead and play guitar for a band. And so I didn't have enough material though, because we, as a duo, he did a lot of the singing. So I didn't have the songs. I knew how to play parts of the songs. I knew how to sing backup vocals to some of the songs. So I had to make a decision. I was like, do I want to keep doing this? What do I want to do? And I kind of buckled down, and I was like, well, you could sit down and learn all these cliche cover songs that, God, you're just so sick of playing. But it's like, I did. I learned some of those, but I also was like, I also want to be the guy that people are like, wow, I would never have expected to hear that song. A cover of that song. And then holding true to my art, I wanted to play my own music, my original music. So there are certain venues that lend themselves to playing your music. And then, on a Saturday afternoon in the Strip, nobody's listening to I'm like, here, listen to this latest song I'm putting together. Give me your thoughts.
And I think for people that are like the Strip, so Brian is not Strip A. So it's just like for just like context in Pittsburgh, there's an area within Pittsburgh that the Strip District is kind of like, it's kind of like where you find a whole lot of produce varieties. There's different restaurants. It's a huge thing on a Saturday for people to say, go down a Strip. If I am to coin, as they would say, it's like a big open market. It's a huge thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's not. I was offered one time with a band to play on stage at a strip club. If my parents watch this, they'll say, what in the hell? It never happened. Never happened. Mom, it never happened. But just one of those things where that was the Strip. It's a good thing you clarified what that.
Yeah. Just really quick, but it is a really rad place. And I can understand on a Saturday, they don't want to hear original music. They just want people to be entertained while they shop, because this is a form of service. And that's what I'm just now kind of getting just as we're talking about this. I think the difference when you're in a band and you have your original material, you're like, this is us. It's our art. And we want you to listen to this. People that have you in bars, restaurants, they want you to entertain the customer so that they stay longer, buy more things, and make the restaurant money. So you are providing a service so that restaurant then can make more money.
That's it. Yeah.
That's it.
That's it. It's not as often anymore, but I do. So every now and then you have a bar owner or a venue owner says, well, how many people are you going to bring? And I'm like, oh no, listen, it's one of those things where I'm playing an hour from where I live. And it's like, I don't have this fan base up there. It's most of the places that book me get live music regularly. They've built that up. People know there's live music there certain nights of the week, that kind of a thing. Now, the idea is to get them to come back when you're there. So that's key. And with online promotions and things like that. But that's what you're there for. You're there to provide a service to entertain. And if you can get them all singing along and they're having fun and they're staying and they're ordering another round, you're winning.
Now, when you started to do this, did you realize there were certain songs that resonated more with certain crowds that, like, at first, or is it just sometimes like even if you have a set and you're getting a feel of the, and you're like, oh shit. And like, I'm going to pull this one out instead.
Yeah. I do not. And I absolutely want to preface this by saying I don't have anything against anybody that uses a set list or an iPad to read their chords or read their lyrics. I mean, I do see that a lot. One of the things that I kind of set out to do was if I can't sell it kind of as my own song and my own, I don't play it. I'd rather jack up one of the lines of lyrics and just laugh it off and keep moving. It's human. And it's just when you're reading from something or you're like, well, I know that the crowd's really into it right now, and I was going to go into this ballad next. That's what my set list says. But no, I don't use one. I 100% read the audience. So I play, and here's the, I probably know, I don't know, maybe 150 plus songs well enough to play them. I don't know where they're stored at up there, but I got to be running out of room. But it's one of those things where there are certain ones I don't play for a long period of time. And then it's like, if you've got a crowd that's into country, which is not everywhere, it's like, okay, let's keep banging out a few more country songs. Sometimes you play a country song and you can hear a pin drop and everybody's, and so you're like, okay, they're more of the classic rock, adult, contemporary. Yeah. Yeah. So you have to really read the audience. There's very few songs that I probably play back to back. There's a couple I can think of that I connect because I'm capoed in a certain position and it works, things like that. But for the most part, it's all just reading the room.
Now, to me, 150 songs. So let's go off of that. How do you, because the one thing that I love, and we've talked about this, is it's dynamic control of your guitar and having the capability of making each song feel like the song. Right, and you're not playing at one level all the way through, like 150 songs. They're all Jenga, Jenga, Jenga. Here's the next one. Jenga, Jenga, Jenga. Here's the next one. Jenga, Jenga. Like, right. How do you, what is your take, especially when dissecting a song and realizing like, oh, I also still have to make this engaging. Like I got to do this, like, cause it's just me and my guitar.
Yeah, for sure. Well, many of the songs I do, everybody's heard a million times. So So as far as cover songs, you just know how they go, and there's that. But when you're doing a rock song, I'll just come up with one like a Three Doors Down song that people that's always a good band to cover. They've got a lot of hits. So it's like when you do one though, when they go into the verses, I mean the guitar's really laid back and they're picked out and things. But then as you're building into that chorus, you're dynamically, you got to, you start to, maybe you're not picking anymore. You start to strum or palm mute and you're kind of tapping on the guitar and playing. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's like almost like there's that build and they know something's changing. There's certain songs, if I don't know them that well, or if it's something rather new, I listen to them. It's kind of like our active listening that we do to references. I will listen to a song just ad nauseum and just to where it's just really starts to become second nature, but it's usually one I like. That's one thing. I don't set out to learn something I really don't like. I mean, yes, I can play Margaritaville, but I will tell you, I don't play that song unless it is requested at a well-paying, older crowd. I'm just not, you're not going to hear that in my set every Saturday or every Friday, no.
Here's an interesting factoid. So Madeline, who's one of our coaches, she loves Jimmy Buffett.
Oh, that's okay, Maddie.
she is a huge, because she told me this and I was like, really? I was like, Jimmy Buffett?
He's an entertainer.
She was like, I'm a huge parrot head. And I'm like, parrot? And she was like, that's what they call them, parrot heads. And I was like, no, they don't. They do. And I looked up and I was like, they do.
I went to one Buffett show. Out at Star Lake, out in Pittsburgh. And once, 20 years ago, once was enough. You got to give the guy accolades. I mean, great performer. He's built something like, you can't even compare it, Taylor Swift, but I'm saying they built something. They built this following, and it's more about the party for him than anything else. I mean,
he has his own, there are 3 areas of retirement communities. that are called Margaritavilles. Because when Matt was here, we were talking about it and we just Googled, and then it was like, there's one in Hilton Head, there's one in, I think, Pensacola, and there's another one north.
Yeah, I
and
believe
it was
it.
just like, I don't know many artists that have their own retirement resort communities.
Right.
But that's an interesting point. Like, if you're going to sell something, you have to also be into it, because if it's just you in a band, sometimes you can hide behind when you're not crazy about like a song that you're doing.
Sure.
Like, they're taking it. But if it's just you and your guitar, you have to sell it. And if you're not crazy about it, people can tell.
Yeah, they can tell. And
yeah,
you definitely, you have to. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are songs that I do, and I'm thinking, wow, if I had $1 for every time I played this song in my lifetime, but they still, it's a song that works, and so you just find that spot to throw it in. And I hope that I'm appearing to have a good time, because I usually am. Hey, there's no doubt you're doing 3-4 nights a week sometimes. There's nights you're just kind of like, but I do remind myself, what else? I'm playing my guitar and performing for people, and it is lucrative. I mean, that's one thing that, if I would ever talk with anybody about getting into the live game, it does take a little time to build up those kinds of gigs.
Yeah.
You've got to get out there and be seen. And then the referrals, I rarely, very, very rarely do I knock on a door anymore or pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Very rarely. I'm doing about 120 shows a year. 98% of them are booked ahead. They're from prior performances or from referrals, or, hey, I saw you play here. So, I mean, I'm blessed. That's amazing. I'm not saying it's going to happen right away, but you definitely have to. But here's the thing. There's so many people that do go out and play for nothing, or I know it's about loving your art and everything else, but they really do hurt our, I guess, industry as far as a local performance, because we all talk and we all, Pittsburgh's a small, big city. So it's like, you run into people so it does, it does hurt the rest of us when if you go out playing for not because you've never played before. I mean, you still have to, there should be sort of this minimum.
And I'm curious about that, because I feel like to get to where you are, especially with referrals and knowing, like, I think we were talking yesterday and you were like, oh yeah, there was this, I played this corporate gig and like, it was great. And I played last year and I didn't have to say anything. The gig ended and she was like, well, if I don't see you, I'll see it, here next year. It was just like that. Again, you've locked in that corporate gig to play without all you had to do was just show up, but do well, because you've been able to play efficiently with your guitar, like communicate, hundreds of different songs with your guitar, keep it engaged, keep energy, do what's required. I feel someone that's not, why guitar skills are very valuable is because in that sort of scenario, if you're not that good, you can't really do this. It's going to be kind of cringe.
Yeah. And these owners or these people that book, they rely on, one of the biggest things is their staff. They rely on their staff. Let's face it, their staff sees all these different acts coming through for different reasons. Yeah. And they do give a lot of feedback. I've come to find that's a big thing. And then, like you said, selling it to the audience and the crowd that's there. If you're not an amazing vocalist, I mean, and your voice is the instrument, and your chords are, it's almost like you'd have to really overcompensate. And I can't name too many of those offhand. Yeah. So it will show if you are not at a level of playing that's, you don't have to be, elite, but you've got to be able to communicate it and sell it.
Rhythmically, you have to be strong.
Oh yeah, right. You better be strong rhythmically, at least. Yeah. Right.
So it's like, those are the things, and like to be able to control dynamically your guitar. So the things that you're talking about, like, oh, that feels like a verse, that feels like a chorus, and not like, that feels like one strum pattern. And, it's just like ding, 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 all the way straight through.
I just thought of something funny. I'll tell you where where the real dynamic challenge is. I won't mention the venue, but it's where they put you when they put you near where the greeter is, the hostess, whatever they call it, when you're coming into the place, and you're right there, and people are trying to talk, and they almost look annoyed that you're there. Anybody of my Pittsburgh friends, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's like one of those things where I actually soften the whole. I back off just to not piss them off anymore. Let them do their thing. It's now it's only that kind of venue, but you want to talk about controlling your dynamics.
But I mean, that's also to being, and that's probably what has also made your gigs, lucrative and recurring, is because what you're describing too is like another level, which I didn't think about that. The idea that the staff is probably communicating because they're constantly having to go around and they're trying to get tips. And if people are annoyed because they're like, I don't like this.
Oh, they do. Yeah, they talk.
They're good. But if they're like, it was engaging. The crowd was great. They ordered more drinks. That was fun. It was awesome. Of course, they're going to be like, they're great. And you being aware spatially too, like, hey, this is where people are coming in. This is their first experience at the restaurant. And if I'm like, no, wow,
right,
living on a prayer, and just like screaming, it's just going to be like, but if you are, there's so many nuances to this that you have to be aware of. But if you are on top of being good at what you do, to me, this is invaluable. And it's, as you said, like, this is where it's just reoccurring. Yeah. It's reoccurring.
Yeah, it is. Another thing, I mean, we talk about this as well, just with co-writing, everything else. Be somebody good to work with too. Be somebody, be nice, be polite, answer their emails or their calls, as promptly as you can, and just be easy to work with. Yeah. Kind of like we talk about, submitting songs to briefs. It's like, do they have to do a bunch of work with the song, or is it just ready to go, plug and play?
Yeah.
It's, you need to be flexible. Sometimes you'll go to a venue you've played umpteen times and they're like, yeah, we can't put you in that corner. It sounds like they're putting baby in a corner. You can't put them in a corner tonight because we've got something going on over there. So it's like, we need to put you over here. And you're like, well, that's not where I usually play. And it's like,
that's not my spot.
That's not my spot. You've got to be flexible. It's pretty rare, but you got to be flexible to work with the venue too. In this city, it doesn't matter if it's a Wednesday night or a Thursday night gig, and during the Penguins season, you're not starting until that game's over. I mean, especially hockey playoffs, they usually cancel you typically. But I do know there's some venues that, I'm slated to start at like 8 or 9, but no. And if it goes into overtime, they're like, I don't care. We'll pay you. You may only play an hour, but you can't play while the game's on. So you gotta be flexible.
The idea that you're just reiterating this, and I think this is one of the biggest things, is just like, be nice.
Yeah.
Because I think people would rather deal, if I got into this, I'm not the greatest singer. It's like, I can hold down my guitar, but it's like my strength that I could leverage is just like being polite, being nice, being prompt.
Yeah.
Not being a pain. And if they go like, hey, we have to put you here. It's no problem. Absolutely. Whatever. That's totally fine. The idea that I would be like, I prefer that spot. Right. It's like, you're not going to get asked again, because they're going to be like, that's not the pain they want to deal with.
Right.
And it just sounds like you've got to hone not only your technical ability in understanding these songs and performing these songs, but you hone in your people skills, your selling skills, because it has to be on. You're selling yourself. Right. You have to sell it to the audience. So it's just like, you have to be very accommodating.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm just thinking about the other night, the event I did, the woman that hosts this every year, she's been doing it for years. I mean, I'm only one facet of what she's got going on that night.
Yeah.
So it's, and so it's like, if I'm a pain in her ass, as far as, when I'm there, it's like, well, the musician's here, make way. It's like, you need to be as easy to work with, because they've got caterers, they've got, all these different, and then the same goes with just even your local bars. It's like, I mean, it's a little more, it's a little more in tune there with the owner or the bar manager, because it's the kind of place it is, but they're worrying about sales, the alcohol sales, food sales, the staff, the bartender didn't show up that called off. I mean, you're one facet of their day or their night.
They've got 10 other problems. You don't want to be one of them.
No,
and it's just like,
no.
and it's just, you want to think of them as like, when your name comes up, like, it's so easy to work with. Like,
Right.
Can we just get so-and-so? And to me, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, but I don't live in Pittsburgh, like, should I move? Because I'm just like, to me, what's interesting you described, and I feel I see this in lots of cities, especially further, throughout, even where I live, there's certain aspects to Nashville that are like, if we're talking Broadway, that's completely different. But what's interesting, the further south you go in Nashville, where it's like, yeah, the breweries that have popped up, whether it be the wineries that are there, and there's some form of live music that's happening that are just cover songs. I remember I went to a Mexican restaurant and there was just a guy he had his gig and he was gigging, and it was no country songs whatsoever. They were just classic rock songs. And I was like, okay, Here we go. And I think it's everywhere. But to me, the things that you're mentioning, you can't just be like, I'm not that bad. No, you have to be, you have to know your instrument. You have to know those songs. You have to sell it well. You have to be engaged, and you have to be aware of, where you're going, what their things are, what they have to work with. You don't want to be a problem. You want to be very understanding and not just a pain in the ass.
And sometimes you're going to get double booked.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're going to, there's just, it's an outdoor show and it's not rain or shine. I mean, they're just, because they're like, listen, I'm not going to have you tonight. Nobody's going to sit outside. No, I'm not going to sell any alcohol. I'm not going to sell any food. So, and it sucks. You hate to get, but it's one of those things where that's just part of that flexibility. You do need to have command of your instrument. And if you don't, let's just, I've got a lot of friends in duos, and we were just talking about this yesterday. I think, it's that who, not how kind of thing where be the best guitar player you can be, but pair up with a vocalist, male or female or vice versa. And it's one of those things where equally as easy as it is in this area right now for solo, the duos are doing very, very well, too. But I think a lot of the stuff probably applies in any city.
Yeah.
You need to still have your chops, as they used to say. I don't know if they say that anymore, but you still have to be able to know your instrument. I don't care if you play piano, guitar, banjo. I mean, you better be able to communicate with that instrument.
Yeah.
And then all of these other little facets being easy to work with and flexibility, that all applies anywhere, I think.
All right, we need your help because we're creeping up on the 100th episode of this podcast, and we're aiming to get 100 reviews on Apple Podcasts. I know that's a pretty brave goal, but I think we can do it because we've got amazing listeners. So if you haven't left us a review yet, take a few moments, talk about your favorite episode, leave us 5 stars, and then that's it. You've done your part, and we appreciate it so much because reviews matter. The algorithm notices it and then recommends this podcast to other people that are like, oh, I've already been listening to a podcast about songwriting, but I'm going to check this one out. So believe me, your review is helping us bring this podcast in front of more listeners. So thanks in advance. Now, if someone is like, let's say they're mid-level of guitar, they're not bad, but when, we're mentioning like, hey, you got to have solid rhythm. You have to have solid things to work on. They're like, oh, what do I do? What is some of your best recommendations too for someone that's looking to better their rhythm so that they can start communicating like, dynamics of the song? And this could also flow into their own craft as well. Not just like the cover aspect, but like as they're doing that, they realize, oh, this can actually flood into my personal songs.
Sure. Oh, no doubt. You definitely want to practice with the metronome. We talk about it all the time. I'll catch myself practicing I'm like, nope, let's throw that on. Let's just see how this feels, because that matters when you're playing live, because it's noticeable when people are like speeding up. It's like if it's like a drummer that's not really all that great and they're speeding up and slowing down, and it's just the song went from a 120 BPM to 80. That and then it's just all back and forth.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that with the coaching that some of the people that I've met through Songwriting for Guitar and that I've worked with, that's where they are. But they know one strumming pattern.
To me, you're saying there's got to be versatility in there. There has to be, as parts change.
You will bore the audience. You're probably end up boring yourself.
Do you see people that do that? Do you see people in a live, like maybe you see them, you catch a set of someone and you're immediately like, they're using the same pattern.
Yeah.
Like the next one is again. Oh my Lord.
Yeah.
They're using it again.
No, there are local acts, that we will go to see on nights I'm off, and typically we know the ones that we like.
Yeah.
And if we can catch them, we do, but we'll be somewhere sometimes and you'll just hear some. And I don't know where the last song ended and where the next song began, because it's it's the same strumming pattern. It's the same. And then, it's not all about vocal, but if you're strumming the same way and you're singing everything the same way with the same tail on the end of every word, like one set's about it, we're good. It's in it. I'm you and I, like we would be over, I don't want to say critical, but we're going to listen to that. Like we listen to songs, we're listening to well beyond just the lyrics and the word, and the melody. I mean, we're listening to, there's in my left ear, I've got this going, I hear this and I hear that. So we're going to be a little more in tune with it, where your general guy drinking a Miller Lite probably isn't really.
He just knows that, like, I'm not crazy about it. He can't put it to words. And then meanwhile, we're like, it's because they're not doing this and they're not doing that. Kind of the triggers for an audience because most audiences, if we're trying to describe song structure, they're not going to be like, a bridge is this, a da-da-da is this.
Right,
they're just going to be like, the chorus. The part I sing along to.
The part that
I know. And it's just
I like the best. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, that's the goal of this, is the guide, so that the average layperson who doesn't understand, but understands it and we can communicate it well, that it does connect. Because if you're not making that connection, it seems like you probably won't be playing here again.
Right. And even if you're background music, if you're bad background music, or if you insist on being louder than you should and it's not that good and now it's loud, it's a bad combination. And the thing is, again, I'm speaking for Pittsburgh, that's where I play, but it's one of those things where I would imagine that most venue owners and managers are similar, where they're just going to be like, yeah, that just wasn't good last time. They're going to remember, you might get a couple shots to play, but they're listening to the feedback too.
Mm-hmm. But sure. If the sales aren't that good, people aren't that crazy, the staff was like, they were okay. They were kind of a dick.
That's another very good point, though.
Yeah.
Many times, you play a place and you're like, wow, this place is usually packed. I played a place last Friday that I play often that usually is, as they say, standing room only. I mean, the line at the bar is packed. Every table was full. Last Friday, not typical. It was a little, and so you're going to have nights where it's maybe not as good. But I don't fear that the owner's not having me back though. It's like, you'll have that one guy every now and then. They go, well, I mean, you didn't really bring anybody, but for the most part, you have enough good nights, and you do what you do well enough.
Yeah.
They want you back. So those nights you've got wiggle room. If you don't have such a great crowd, they're not basing it on that one night. They're not basing it on a couple bad nights a year.
But what's interesting is, like, if you back it up with just like still being like solid,
right?
Like still being good and like, cool, there's a couple people here, but I'm still going to do it as if the room was like packed, so that they still have a great time.
Yeah.
That to me is also, that's interesting, because I think this is where the technical side, where it's just, you still got to be good, because then when there's less, it's more noticeable. It's just like more eyes on you.
It is. And another thing is too, and I have to remind myself of this sometimes too. You never know who's listening. You never know who's in the audience for the most. I mean, you don't know who that guy is at that table. He may be the CEO of a company or has some influence on who they book for their company party in the summertime. And you don't know who that is. But if you're looking like you just don't want to be there, and you're not doing well, even though it's a a small room or a sparse room, very, very quick story. One of the best stories I heard all year, and I never heard the story before. Rusted Root from Pittsburgh. They played a festival many, many, many years ago, and there was nobody. They tell the story. The guy said, "When I mean nobody there, nobody there." And Sheryl Crow was out walking her dog at this festival, and she heard them. And the next thing you know, they're opening on one of her tours. Like, she loved the fact that they looked like they were having so much fun. And now I like their music. That's not a genre I've ever been super into, but it's one of those things where I can appreciate that story, because they were like, well, we can go out there and look pissed because nobody showed up, or we can play our asses off. And who would have ever thought? It was somewhere in New York, and she was walking her dog. I mean, that's a pretty extreme story, but it's like, you don't know who's listening to you.
But this is the other question I get. How did you get into the corporate gig? Because it's one thing doing, restaurant and starting to know that area. To me, then the next level, that's a whole other.
It's a whole other level.
That's a whole other level.
It's a whole other level. It's a whole other level monetarily as well. And that's ideally, I mean, that's those of us that do this a lot. We definitely always say, we love a lot of our venue owners and bar owners. And there's ones we would probably still do, but if we could do corporate and private events all year long, I mean, that's where it's at. So I think it happened many years ago, but I was playing a place. One of the first ones I remember anyway was in north of Pittsburgh, a pretty nice place. It was like a wine bar kind of place. And this guy, similar to what I just said, this guy that owned a small company, a small business, maybe 100 employees or something like that, hired me out for like a company function. And then, that's one of the earliest ones I can remember, but it does seem to then ripple effect. So then somebody at that function, I'll tell you where it really happens is at neighborhood parties in these plans with multi-million dollar homes. It's like, well, I mean, they had Brian, but we have to have an entertainer too.
They're always searching for like the big stage and the spotlight. But what you're describing right here is like, that's not where the money is. That's where your ego might be. But right here, this is where the money is. Is.
And many of them will feed both your ego and your pocket. Many, they do, because some of them, I mean, people are having a great time. Yeah. They feed you, they unlimited this, that, and the next thing. And those can be, I mean, those are where it's at. But that took time to get those. It took some time, but it did seem to start to happen pretty rapidly, like in year 2 and 3, because then you've got some referrals. You could say, someone says, hey, do you do corporate gigs? And if you're like, yeah, I did this thing for PNC Bank, or what I did this. Yeah. And you just drop a couple names, and then like, oh, well,
awesome.
If BNY Mellon had you, I mean, you're probably,
then you're good. You're already, then you're in.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. And to me, that's just like, it's another tier, and it's another level of people that are doing it, where suddenly the pool gets a little smaller. It ain't necessarily big.
Right. Yeah. It definitely gets a little smaller in that. I mean, there's still quite a few that I know that do it, but not as many. And that's where too, as a band, now weddings are still great for bands. I mean, there's still wedding bands, and but the budget may not be there for a full band for these people, even though they're spending big money, but they may have all the money in the world, but they're still thinking about it as well. Like, okay, well, I'm going to budget so much for music. Yeah. Well, it's like, okay, I don't want to put out $4,000 for a band,
but I will,
but I'll put out, a quarter of that for one guy, and it's like for one person for a night.
Yeah.
That's a solid night. Where are you going to make, but it's like so that's where being a solo or a duo, but again, knowing your instrument and crafting this so that you can perform at those and get those recurring type of gigs.
I love that because to me, that is, again, it still comes back. Like, these are all amazing, but it still comes back to you being a solid player, like understanding your instrument and understanding, how to keep it engaging, how to keep it, to move throughout the song, show the dynamic, show the structure of the song, but all of that while at the same time singing and engaging with the audience. So it's like, you have to know that instrument so that your focus can be with that audience and not like, oh, wait a minute, I'm coming to B minor 7th.
Right. That's so funny you say that chord, because that's the one we were talking about the other day. And that one song I do, I still find myself glancing down at the neck, because it's a in the chord progression in that song, it's a tricky one to go grab, but it makes all the difference. But yes, 99% of the time you want to be able to be reading the room and not thinking about what you're doing on the neck of the guitar.
Because like understanding and mastering your instrument more means you're more engaged. If you're more engaged, that means then you're going to connect more. You connect more, you make more money, and you get so it's like it has that ripple effect, because that's why it matters.
Yeah, it does matter. Yeah, for sure.
And what I love, and that's why we have you as a coach. And if anyone's listening to this and is like, well, I want to start mastering my instrument, because this sounds like I'm gigging right now and it's not to where it needs to be. It's not where it needs to be. It's very clunky. I know it is. Like, I'm not necessarily getting asked. If anything, people, it seems like they're rushing me off the stage pretty quickly after I'm done and the next one comes in. Or it's just like, I just want to feel, I think understanding your instrument, and feeling confident is, that's the key, is just because the feeling of it is confidence. It's like, I can't describe where it's just, when you sometimes take it for granted, but understanding your instrument well, that you could play and you can do all those things, those nuances, but you're not overthinking it. Because you have developed that. You've spent time with your instrument.
And that's not, that's not going to, for most people, it's not going to happen overnight, but it doesn't have to be this years and years either. I mean, if you're already playing and you're already performing, then you're already, you're on your way. It's just have to, take a look at, some areas that could be improved. And that's where, like, from the coaching standpoint, seems like most that I've worked with at this point, they definitely are wanting, there is that live performance, facet to it, or element to it, where they are doing it, or they want to do it, or they're doing open mics. And they want to know. So that's why I love being able to bring to the table, is to talk about the live gigging as well.
Yep.
And using the guitar to do so. Some people, they think, oh, am I playing every song that I do note for note, technically exactly how that artist did it, or that you can get to where your instrument, where you're like, okay, yeah, I know that's what he's doing technically, but there are ways to play that chord a little differently. There's things like that, but that takes time, and you have to work on that. What
you're describing there is like, it's like two sides of the pendulum. There's one where people are like super slapping and just all over. And then there's the other side where they're crippled to make a move, because they're like, is it exactly how they breathed when they strummed that chord? Right. It's like, that's not the important question. Neither of those are where you want to be. You want to be right in the center, where it's like you're solid, but you have that leeway, as you said, to also do it your own way.
Especially if you are solo and you are singing, because we all know there are certain picking patterns and things that the lead singer of the band, let's say, that did the song, he's just singing, and the other guy's playing this intricate picking pattern. It's like, okay, so what's a good blend between the two? Something that is going to be recognizable, that is, close, but it may not be, because it's sometimes challenging to sing over. And there's certain songs that take a lot more work than others. So you could find that happy medium. And I'm not saying cheat. I'm saying it's just like, you know it well, and no one even notices that you're not.
Well, I think what you're trying to say is, like, you think it matters, and you think people are like, in the audience are like, oh, I can't believe he didn't do the exact same pattern that in the song. We are never coming here again. But what's going to happen is, they're just going to be like, oh, I like this. This was good. It's the experience. And that's what you're trying to enhance with your songs, because you are acting of service to enhance the experience of the restaurant, the meal, where they're at, that they enjoy it, that it was great, that it was fun. And to me, the value of what you're giving in these coaching sessions to people are, you can scour YouTube for hints, but you will spend years going down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out and piece together. You can't. You eventually need to rely on someone to help you. And there's a difference between someone that's down the street that's like, Cool. I went to school for guitar. That's awesome. Where are you playing right now? Well, how much money do you make with your guitar? Well, if you need to be going to someone that's like actively doing it, is doing the thing that's a little further ahead that can give you that guidance along the way.
And if you're an artist listening to this, getting in front of audiences is the name of the game. So believe me, I do play some of my original material.
Mm-hmm.
I just pick and choose where in the set or when I do it, so that it makes sense, because if no one's paying attention, or if it's not the right atmosphere, you're not really accomplishing what you hope to accomplish. Is they'll start following you. They're jumping online to check out your original music. And
that's a good point, that it's a bridge to you essentially.
Right.
So it's like you're finding them in a space where it's just like, oh, they know this song. They like it. They also like you. And you're inviting them into your world. So there's not only an opportunity to make money, but also an opportunity to start getting followers, people that enjoy how you sing, and they're probably going to love your music.
Yeah. I think it might have been when I was having a conversation with Rick Barker. He said something effective. One of the first things I know he always says, and you say it many times, the song, it's got to be a good song. I mean, the song, it's got to be a good song. But there's a lot of good songs that are still in people's, they say, what's that saying?
The graveyard of great songs is endless.
Yeah, right. There's songs that were never heard by anybody.
Yeah.
So it's like, but then beyond that, it's you who they are subscribing to, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's you. It's not the song. It's got to be good, but it's beyond that.
The song is just a one-time transaction, but like if you're going to have someone that's going to stay with you in the journey, there has to be something that they're like, I really like you. Like you're really good at what you're like, the reason we brought you on is there's lots of people that I know are great at guitar, but I don't think they're going to connect well with people. Like they could be great at their craft, but for me, what's the most important thing is, do you connect well with people? Can you look at what they're doing, understand where they want to go, that you can then take them to where that needs to be? That's ultimately more important than, like, it's a plus that you're a great player. I love great players, but I also love great listeners that can see what someone's doing and know, okay, here's where it needs to go.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people that can do that well. And I think if someone's listening to this and they're like, listen, I've tried I've tried it before. Here's what I'd say. You need someone that will ask the right questions, that will listen. I'm always surprised when people come, with negative experiences of like, guitars. And I'm like, well, did they ask you about this? No. Oh, they just gave you a generic template for the entire thing. And a one size fits all never works. And to me, another level of coaching is understanding where your skill level is, what you're trying to do, and can we create a plan that's going to be effective to get you there? And we'll have these little goal markers along the way so that hey, I'm moving in the right direction.
Right.
Because growth is hard to see on your own.
It is. And working with you on production last year, and it's like I'm a student of that every day. I mean, that's something that, but I feel like now, just going through the different courses that we've done and everything, I feel like I look at guitar much differently now than I did a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
More along the lines of, okay, but what would you do for the song? What does the song need? This goes more into the writing and the production end of things. Whereas it's like, what's best for the song? What are you trying to communicate? We use all these words, but it's like, what are you trying to accomplish here with the song? Does that guitar, the guitar might be so simple, but yet it's so effective.
Exactly. We're not trying to complicate it because we can. That's great. We have that ability.
Right.
Does it need it? Probably not. It just requires this, but that's the skill of a great guitarist, because they know when to I don't need to do this. There's, again, that level of confidence that if it's two chords, it's two chords. If it's me just going, da, 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 that's what it needs to be in the writing aspect. And I think that's another thing that you give really well, is because I think the other thing is the methodology of how I view guitar is why I never brought on anyone, because it never really, there's some people that I'm like, you're almost there, not there yet. But you get that idea. And I think you're just very good at relating. And so we're going to throw this link where you can book a session with Brian. You can jump in, just kind of chat with him about your goals, what you want to do. And to me, that's the most important. What do you want to do? Because if you've been doing guitar for a while and you haven't thought about this, you haven't asked this question, that's why you're stuck most of the time, because you're not thinking about why are you doing this? You're just caught up in the idea of doing it without taking the time aside to think of the long term. What's the point? What am I trying to do with this thing?
Right. That's what we do in the first session.
Yeah.
That's a complimentary session. Just jump on and just talk about what you've been doing and what is it that you want to do.
I think that's so huge, because like, if you can get there, and that to me, just that understanding of making that person, and if you're listening to this, to have that realization of like, oh, that's actually what I want to do. I thought it was this, but now that I'm doing, no, this is what I want to see happen. Then you can just an established framework of what needs to happen technically in terms of a specific practice regime that you can get into place, so that you don't have to rush and be like, well, let's go to YouTube and let's go Palm Mutant. And then suddenly you see 25 videos on it and being like, well, which one's which? This one's from Dale Guitar. This one's from Mike Guitar. This one's from Jim Guitar. This one's from Justin Guitar. I don't know which guitar it's so overwhelming. Right. And to me, to not have that and know that you're going to meet with someone weekly that has a set plan and is more importantly going to hold you accountable to that plan, that's way more important and going to be way more effective in the long run. Yeah.
Yeah. Love to see anyone that wants to jump on. Like I said, it's a free first session. We can just talk about where you're at and where you might want to go. And there's different platforms and different programs for booking sessions, lengths of time, blocks of time, that kind of thing. And not to reveal it, but we've got some pretty cool things coming up this fall too.
Oh, there's some really cool things. I'm really excited. We talked about this yesterday, and I'm super excited with this. And so you will find out later, but we're going to throw the link in the description and book a session with Brian. Brian, this was awesome. Thanks for hanging and talking all things guitar.
Thanks, man. I love talking to you. I look forward to doing it again.
Just as I said in this episode, if you're someone that's done the guitar lesson circuit and it didn't work for you, you had an instructor that didn't understand your goals, didn't even ask you your goals, just handed you a curriculum, or you're someone that scours YouTube and you've been trying to get these bits and pieces and nothing is working, but you want to do this, why not learn directly from Brian? Sign up for that first free session with him. Get in there, because he's someone that's going to listen what you're trying to do with it and then craft a plan that's tailored to you, so that you can start hitting the marks that you want, so that you can start moving in the direction of where you're supposed to be. Instead of you just dreaming or thinking about it, you know that you're actually taking action and things are happening. So just scroll down and book your first free session with Brian right now in the description. Because believe me, if you're someone that knows that they can monetize their gigs, but it's just not happening, why not learn from someone that is doing it and doing it well? And that does it for this week's episode. It was edited and produced by Chris Fafalius. I'm Mike Myers. Thanks for listening.